In my episode 183, I gathered stories specific to one region of Korea, Jeju Island in that case. Following the same line, this time I collected stories from Busan City, the southern port town. This may turn into a series of a sort in the future. Busan is the second biggest city in South Korea, with a population over 3 million or 7 million if one includes the greater Busan area. Not only it is the biggest city in the southern provinces, but also the biggest port of Korea. In terms of volume of storage capacity, Busan Port ranks the 5th worldwide. Considering South Korean economy is largely export dependent, the importance of Busan is unmissable. Busan has a dynamic geography. It of course has various beaches, but also very mountainous. Actually so mountainous, it hindered Busan to become a modern city for a long time. But during the Korean War, the population and the importance of the city shot up dramatically. And by now you see high-rise buildings and apartments built ever higher slopes of the mountains in the city. The diverse nature attracts lots of holiday makers. Haeundae Beach is by now a bit overdeveloped and lost the authenticity, but still remains the most famous one. Jagalchi Market is popular among those who want to enjoy fresh seafood. Culture-wise, Busan is very proud for not being Seoul and keeps its own from food to dialect. A lot of trends from Japan used to come to Korea first via Busan. It being a port town and geographically closer to Japan played a role. There were usually fashion and pop cultures, but some odd bits among them were also various occult culture. For example, Bunshin-saba game, the Korean Ouija board game, is thought to be influenced by the Japanese Kokurisan game and first started spreading from Busan area. Considering the size and the natural and cultural diversity, Busan shares a lot of spooky tales of its own. Actually, some from my previous episodes were from Busan already. Most notably, the first accounts about Jangsanbom, the modern Korean cryptid, stories regarding the train crash at Gupo Station, and Amidong, the village built with former tombstones. If you missed them, I'll leave the links in the description. Today, we are going to look at a few more spooky and weird stories from the port city, from some urban myth to ghost sightings at its landmarks. So, here are 5 allegedly true spooky stories from the city of Busan. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by a host, Anthony. My father worked as a taxi driver in the 70s. This is his story from the time. Past 10 one night, a man and a woman got on. At the time, taxi was considered a luxury, and especially young people would rather walk than get a taxi. Maybe they were a young couple on a date, and the man was trying to impress the woman? My dad thought. But it didn't take long to realize that couldn't be the case. They sat well apart at the back seat, hardly talked to each other, and when they did, they were a bit too formal to each other too. They didn't seem to want to go to a certain destination. The man basically asked to make stops at famous and scenic spots around Busan. Yongdusan Park, Nampodong, Haeundae Beach. And that way, they had Dad drive around over 2 hours.
The fare is going up quite a bit. Are you sure you want to carry on?
Dad asked, and the man quietly handed him 300,000 Korean won. That would be over 4 million won or nearly $3,000 in current value, well over what Dad could expect to earn in a month. Dad had no reason to miss such a golden opportunity. When they got to Haeundae Beach, the man and the woman got out and just looked to the pitch-dark night sea. When they got back on, the man said, "Do you know the new crematorium in Tangamdong? Take us there now, please." A crematorium? At midnight? Dad didn't feel good about it and tried to excuse that he didn't know where it was. But the man insisted that he would give directions. As the taxi got closer to the destination, the passengers got gradually more restless. Then the man abruptly said, We are going to die soon, Mr. Driver." Dad didn't even know how to react. Surely he was joking? But soon, the woman started sobbing. "We sold our life for money. We just thought to see all the nice spots before we die."
Oh, young gentlemen like you shouldn't make such a joke.
Dad stopped him short because he was getting uncomfortable. "Okay. I'm sorry. We are getting off at the crematorium," the man said. Weird and somewhat creepy night, but in the busy, hard-working routines, Dad soon forgot about it. Until he heard a weird urban myth surrounding the crematorium a few years later. That a young man and a woman, for the condition of writing out their huge debt, were burnt to death there as human sacrifices. I was born and grew up in 사직동, 동래구, Busan. I guess it's best known for the baseball stadium there. The whole town is surrounded by a mountain called Swemi Mountain. In the mountain is a little cave called 비녀굴, could be translated to Hairpin cave. The local myth goes that during the war with Japan in the late 16th century, local women hid themselves there and worked on making military uniforms. Inside the cave is a little hall, and it is said to be created by the women who picked on the cave wall with their hairpin whenever they felt anxious about their men who were drafted to the war. By now, it turned into a popular spot for shamans to pray or perform a ritual for some reason. Back in 1996, I was a middle school student. One summer day, I and 3 mates were hanging around at my place. Normally we would have roamed and fooled around, but that day was so hot, and none of our homes were air-conditioned, that we were just lounging around. Then one mate suggested,
Hey, why don't we go to that cave? Hairpin cave, I mean.
"What for? I don't feel like hiking in this heat," I said.
My dad said it stays cool around the cave, shaded by huge rocks.
"I heard shamans flock around that spot, though. Isn't it a bit creepy?" other friends said.
Well, that's even better. Cool and creepy, perfect for a hot summer day,
the first mate insisted. Since we were all bored to death anyway, we in the end agreed to go. The trail up to the cave is very steep, so much so it was used for army trainings too. Soon we were all drenched in sweat, but then as we started to get a view over the town, we felt it was worthwhile after all. Strange thing was, we didn't run into any other people all the way. The trail being so near the town, it was a popular hiking course and almost always pretty crowded. About 20 minutes later, we reached the cave. Time was just heading to 2 in the afternoon, and the summer sun was high, but around the cave was indeed well shaded, and some cool breeze blew from the cave too. We sat on the rock nearby and cooled down our sweat. Then we saw somebody coming up, the first person we ran into that day. It was an old lady dressed in hanbok, Her back was so bent, all we could see was her white head. She didn't even turn to our direction, but walked straight to the opening of the cave. She stared at the dark inside for a while, then dropped and started sobbing. She took a handful of something from her pocket and scattered it to the cave, and then loudly lamented. "Son! My son!" Maybe because it was echoed inside a cave, but her voice was sharp, almost penetrating. So much so, some of us instinctively covered our ears. "Hey, let's just go," one mate said, and we started to go quietly. "Stop!" The old lady screamed and turned to face us. We were all frozen there, stuck, because of how she looked. Her lower jaw was missing. One eye seemed stitched shut, and the toes were so long on her bare feet. She then threw what she had in her hand to us, as she did to the cave earlier. I looked down what they were. They were teeth. One mate screamed, and we finally turned around and ran. We ran up the trail. Downwards would have been more logical, but in that state, we just followed the one who first started running. We stopped only when we reached the top of the mountain. We were a mess with sweat, tears, and dribble, but the bright sunlight of the summer gave us a sense of security. As my muffled ears popped, gradually I heard noises of people. I looked around and was surprised to find other hikers all around us. Middle-aged ladies taking a photo, a guy having a smoke, a young couple with a little boy. But we saw none of them all the while until now. It made us panic even more. As one mate suggested, we took a different way down because we couldn't dare to pass the Hairpin cave again. None of us talked about the day. We told among ourselves that nobody would believe us, but on one side, I guess we were a bit too shaken even just to recount the experience. We later went on to different high schools, and it was a few years later that we got together again. This and that chit-chat somehow led to the summer's day again.
By the way, I wonder if any of you heard what I heard too, from the inside the cave,
one mate said. Do you mean the sound of drums and gong? I heard that too, the other said. Like that of a shaman's ritual, I had to add. We still meet up occasionally. Now we all turned middle-aged guys, but we still talk about the day over a drink. And I can't help myself getting a little chill down my spine. In 2010, somebody posted a rather weird claim on his personal blog. It's based on weird graffiti that was said to be found in various spots near Haeundae. It's a short sentence scribbled with a black spray paint. It said, 몸속 로봇 나가. Could be translated to, get the robot out of my body. The blogger claimed a secret science lab was created in 1926 where currently a footbridge stands linking Haeundae apartment block number 2 and number 4. Their task was to create the first prototype of robot. but the lab was destroyed during the Korean War, and all the research record and many of the leading scientists were lost. 몸속 로봇 나가, get the robot out of my body, was the secret password to access the hidden lab. Even today, if one shouts the sentence in the spot, one could feel the faint rumble from the ground, as if the door mechanism trying to reveal the entrance to the long-forgotten secret lab. Of course, this is an outlandish conspiracy theory that is on the level of Nazi Germany made contact with aliens. The word robot itself was first popularized only in 1920 by a Czech play, and the concept was nothing more than an amusing fantasy then. Besides, in 1926, Korea was under the rule of Imperial Japan, and there's no way that Japanese authorities should run such an important secret project in Korea rather than in Japan. Anyway, the blog post earned just a minor attention, if nothing else for the fact that it was true that the Get the Robot Out of My Body graffiti did exist around that part of Busan, and was soon forgot in time. That is, until 2021, when an article appeared on the local Busan daily newspaper, digging around this rumor. I think one should note it was the height of the pandemic, and with nothing much else going on around, a reporter must have decided to run with it for an entertainment value. The reporter first visited the said footbridge from the blog post, and even shouted out, "Get the robot out of my body!" But nothing happened. He then next visited the spot where the earliest sighting of the graffiti was found, but it could not be found anymore. Turned out, in 2017, the motorway there was expanded, and the concrete wall where the graffiti was scribbled on was gone to give way to the new lane. The disappointed reporter then just drove around the surrounding area in a vague hope to find the graffiti in other spots. And surprise, he did spot a couple of them, both of them on pretty obscure and hard-to-reach spots. Based on the photo of the now disappeared graffiti, reporters speculated they were written by the same person. Were they then all written about the same time? But could they remain in so clean a condition after more than 10 years? Or could this person be kept leaving the same sentence here and there all these years? Finally, he reached out to the blogger who posted a conspiracy about the robot lab. The blogger said he wrote it as a teenager for fun, but strongly denied that he left the graffiti himself. In the end, the reporter concluded the article without a clear answer. Well, what do you think? This probably is nothing after all, but also could be an interesting case of how an urban myth could be created. Back in 1992. I just graduated high school then, but gave up university because my family couldn't afford it. I got a part-time at a Chinese restaurant owned by a friend's father, and through that friend, I got to get acquainted with his friend too. He was in a similar shoes as myself and shared lots of interests too, so we got quickly very close. His wit carefree presence lifted a lot of weight that I felt about the future. One night, we went to Songjeong in Busan to have a drink and chat away my anxious mind, looking down the view of the sea. But it started raining, so we had to call it a day. We decided to share a taxi to the central station. Just past Haeundae, the taxi pulled over without warning, and an old lady jumped into the passenger seat. It doesn't happen much nowadays, and also illegal, but back then it was rather common for a taxi to take on a second passenger to share the ride so long they were heading to the similar direction. That way, for the same time and mileage, basically the driver could make double the money. The unexpected second passenger was rather odd. She was dressed in black hanbok traditional dress and smelt strong of incense. I expected she might be a shaman. We were a bit annoyed that the driver took her in without bothering to ask us, but we were young and didn't say anything. But then the driver pulled over yet one more time on the way. It was about where the big convention center was to be built later, called Bexco, now one of the landmarks locations in Busan. But back then, there was nothing, just an empty plot that used to be occupied by an Air Force base. A few lampposts dotted sparsely around only added to the eerie atmosphere. My eyes naturally followed where the driver was staring at to figure out what was going on. Across the dark, empty field, a woman in white was approaching. Gosh, this damn driver wanted to take on yet another passenger. "You must have a wonderful eyesight, mister." My friend was just as annoyed as I was and said to the driver with an irony,
I'm sorry, guys, but don't you feel pity for the young woman in this rain and out in nowhere?
Smooth driver made an excuse. I looked out at the woman again and noticed her walk was a bit funny, bit too airy, as if she was floating over rather than walking. Soon she got close enough for me to make out the details of her dress. A delicate white dress with some black patterns and black ribbon belt. It was a pretty dress, and even though her face was hidden behind the wet long hair, I kind of expected a beauty. "How dare!" We were all startled by the loud shout from the old lady in the passenger seat. "Damn dirty bitch trying to lure us! Go away, you unholy thing! Go away!" She carried on shouting. I didn't know what she was talking about, but the driver seemed to know something. He frowned, spitted under his breath,
Fuck me,
and hurriedly started the car. "You boys, I saved your life today," the old woman said, looking back at us. Her heavily made-up face to me resembled a Grim Reaper, and I shuddered. The old lady got off first, and for the rest of the ride to the central station, the driver kept swearing,
"What a bad luck! Shit, F me, F me!"
I still thought he was complaining about the weird old woman, and looked at my friend with a smirk. He was shivering. "Oi, what's up?" "Oh, my baby boy got scared?" I teased. "Didn't you see?" Friend's reaction was serious. "I did. What about it?" "I mean the young woman. When the old lady shouted, I kept staring at the young woman in white. She bent down her back to look inside the taxi. And her eyes, behind those wet hairs, her eyes were all white, all bloodshot too. And her lips, no, they were more like a slit where the lips should be, was smirking at us with a dark stain or a bruise on her left chin." Driver suddenly stopped the car again with a loud
"Shit! Get off! I can't drive anymore tonight. Who knows if that damn thing didn't put a curse on the car or something,"
he said, and he himself got off, leaving his car on the roadside. My friend was still shivering so much that I had to take him to a bar and make him empty a bottle. So, the old woman saved our life after all? Time passed, and it was now 2009. By then I had a profession of my own and felt settled down enough to have a hobby of photography too. One day, I and a fellow photography enthusiast friend went to take shots at a motor show at Bexco, the convention center. Before going back home in the evening, we sat by the central square of the convention center, having a coffee. And then, my eyes caught a woman in white, who circled around the edge of the water reservoir of the fountain there, round and round. At first, I pointed her to my friend with a giggle, but suddenly, I got a chill. I dropped a half-finished coffee, grabbed the hand of my friend, and hurriedly left there. I don't know if the woman was the same woman, but I haven't been back to Bexco again ever since. Hwangyang Tunnel was opened in 1996 to link Cheonpo-dong and Taeyeon-dong in Busan. The tunnel has an unfortunate reputation of frequent accidents. In the past 5 years alone, 58 cases were reported with 124 casualties. The biggest tragedy took place in 2009 when the torrential rain caused a landslide down to one end of the tunnel and wiped 4 cars off the road and caused multiple collisions. Even police would comment that they can't understand why so many accidents occur around there, as if the tunnel was haunted or something. Indeed, the tunnel had some spooky reputations. Especially taxi drivers who have to drive through the tunnel frequently at night often recount they saw something unlikely there. One account goes like this. One day, I took a taxi. The driver suggested Hwangyang Tunnel would be the shortest route, but further asked if I was okay with it. I didn't think much of it and told him to go ahead. As we got near the tunnel, the driver opened his mouth again. I must remind you, there's no way a pedestrian could be walking on the motorway in the tunnel, so even if you see somebody in the tunnel, just ignore. I already heard some rumors about the tunnel before, but never took it seriously. But to hear it from the taxi driver and just a few seconds before we entered the very tunnel was frankly a bit unnerving. I confess, I deliberately looked down on my phone only the whole time until we got out of the tunnel. Apparently, it's not just the tunnel that has the spooky reputation, but the whole surrounding area. According to a story submitted to a horror podcast, the area before Hwangyang Tunnel is by now all redeveloped, but previously there was a small village called Euyongchon. My family used to live there and had to experience all sorts of misfortunes. Even under the broad daylight, we would hear somebody knocking on the door, but there would be nobody when we answered the door. Mom often commented something would bang on from the rooftop when she was alone home, or she would feel some invisible force pulling her legs and arms. But the biggest tragedy was that Mom passed away untimely and with no apparent reason. Since then, we moved out. But even recently, my sister said she witnessed a man drenched in blood by the entry of Hwangyang Tunnel. Even Hwangyang Mountain that the tunnel passes through is not free from the scary reputation. But the best-known ghost sighting from the mountain I have already introduced you in my episode 111. I'll leave the link in the description. So, would you dare to come and enjoy this vibrant port town of Busan? Do you think? Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy this little virtual trip to Busan. Have you ever visited? I myself have visited Busan only once, so I still have a lot to learn and experience about it. Quite a few film productions took place in Busan in recent years. For example, the 2009 film Hairpin, or even some scenes from Black Panther was shot in Busan. Perhaps they could be a good option for you if you want to carry on with a virtual trip to the city. If you enjoyed my work, please leave it a big thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. It's free and will help my tiny channel grow. If you'd support me more directly, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account, the link's in the description, and also there's Super Thanks option here on YouTube for a small donation. Thank you. Until the next, stay safe and take care.